Mario is a known quantity. He always has been. Even as far back as the early and mid-90s, everyone who played games knew what a Mario game needed to be a Mario game. Since the revolutionary debut of Super Mario Bros. On the NES, Mario had remained largely unchanged. Sure, later titles would build out Mario's world while making slight gameplay tweaks to keep things feeling fresh, but the concept and feel were consistent. This was all thanks to the design philosophy of Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto. Mario, at its core, was designed to be approachable. Anybody could pick up a controller and quickly learn how to play, and that was its major strength. Super Mario Bros. Introduced the series staples, and Mario Bros. 2, 3, and World carried the torch forward. If you played one of those titles, you could realistically pick up and play any of them. Mario's major strength is his consistency in feeling and control across multiple titles even to this day. But also just as important, you knew the type of adventure you were going on. King Koopa / Bowser had kidnapped the princess. Sure, the setting might be different and the appearance may vary, but the player as Mario always knew what you had to do, and that was rescue the princess. Mario had dominated since his debut. No game in the 80s or 90s represented video games better. I'm sure you could make arguments for some, but I will not be taking those arguments here. Get out of here, Sonic. Mario was so well known that pre-Pokemon, he was the most recognizable character on the planet, beating out Mickey effing Mouse during Disney's proclaimed animation renaissance. The power of Mario was unmatched, and Nintendo leaned on him hard to close the gap with Sega in the early and mid-90s. But in the back half of the 90s, eyes were looking towards the future. The 16-bit era was coming to an end, and the dawn of the 3D age had begun. Nintendo's fabled next-generation console, the Nintendo 64, was just on the horizon, and Sony had recently released their PlayStation console, which pushed the boundaries of 3D gameplay with such titles as Crash Bandicoot, Gran Turismo, Tekken, and others. Mario had served Nintendo well during the Super Nintendo's lifetime, but even he was ready to make the jump, pun intended, to 3D, and Mario 64 would go on to redefine what was possible for 3D games. But the story of Mario on the Super Nintendo had one last chapter, one which would involve one of Nintendo's most lucrative partnerships from the 16-bit era. Of course, we're talking about Squaresoft, the legendary RPG maker who had made a number of important games for the Super Nintendo. We're talking huge games like Final Fantasy VI, Chrono Trigger, and Secret of Mana, just to name a few. Their involvement with Mario would come at the request of notable RPG critic and Mario creator Shigeru Miyamoto himself, who wanted an RPG game starring Nintendo's most important character. Although the relationship between Nintendo and Square had begun to sour, and perhaps that's a story for another time, the resulting game, Super Mario RPG Legend of the Seven Stars, would be Mario's swan song on the Super Nintendo. Mario RPG starts in familiar territory. As soon as you fire up the game, you're treated to a cutscene of Princess Peach in a field on a beautiful sunny day. Suddenly, the sky grows dark and Bowser swoops in, kidnapping the princess as he is wont to do. Next thing we know, Mario arrives on the scene to give chase. This is intentional. At this time, RPGs were not the established force in America that they are now, and arguably wouldn't reach large mainstream success until Final Fantasy VII a year later. So there was an incredibly high chance that anyone seeing this game on the shelf and picking it up expecting another run-of-the-mill Mario game would be caught off guard when the game's RPG mechanics were introduced. From the very opening scene before the game even starts, it goes out of its way to let you know, hey, don't worry about those scary letters on the front of the box, this is still Mario. Upon starting a new game, Mario is immediately off to do what he does best, and that is rescue the princess. Alright, here we go, we're off on another whirlwind Mario adventure to save Toadstool. I can't wait to start diving into some of these levels, but in the very next scene, Mario arrives at Bowser's Keep. Well, this is kinda strange. In normal Mario games, Bowser's Castle is usually an area saved for the conclusion of the game, serving as the crescendo of the game's adventure. In Mario RPG, however, we're there within minutes of starting the game. That's a bit different, but not to worry, let's see where this goes. Mario enters Bowser's Keep, and here you get to control Mario for the first time. But again, something is different. This isn't a 2D scrolling platform adventure where you move from left to right, but Mario RPG's isometric view gives you a different perspective and the illusion of 3D. But not to worry, Mario still moves relatively similar to the way you expect in that space, running and jumping around in his environment. So as you begin to move around your new environment, you encounter your first enemies, Terrapins, armored Koopas that patrol the castle. You know what to do now, you've done this hundreds of thousands of times. Time to jump on some enemies. You press the jump button and propel yourself towards the enemy, expecting to stomp the Koopa just like you have before. That doesn't happen. Instead, the screen goes black and transitions to a new screen. 2 Koopa enemies stand on one side of the room and Mario stands on the other, facing them down. And they stand there, not doing anything. At this point, the familiarity of Mario is gone, and if this is your first RPG experience, this is something completely new. Mario stands there staring at you, surrounded by button prompts. As you experiment and push the buttons, you go into different menus that give you options. One is attack, one is items, one is defend, and one is special, where you see one option on the menu, which is jump. Okay, that's familiar to me. Let me select jump, and sure enough, Mario jumps across the screen, landing on the Koopa and defeating it. The remainder of Bowser's Keep is a couple more rooms that are filled with a few enemies and simple platforming until you reach what I assume to be Bowser's throne room, maybe? Mario looks up to see Toadstool suspended in midair and leaps onto a comically oversized chandelier to face Bowser, who occupies the opposite comically oversized chandelier. A battle just like the one with the Koopas breaks out, and in the first minutes of the game, you're facing Bowser. A showdown that normally happens much later in Mario games. So you attack Bowser in the way that the game has taught you, but this is ineffective. Toadstool then tells you to aim for the chain holding the chandelier, teaching you that you can change the target of your attacks during battle. The chain breaks, sending Bowser plummeting towards the floor, but not before he tosses a few well-timed hammers to knock Mario from his platform. Mario uses a well-timed jump off Bowser's head to recover, grabbing the chains and securing the princess. Hooray! The day is saved, Toadstool has been rescued, Bowser's been defeated, and all is right with the world. In the first 5 minutes of the game. Suddenly, the screen begins to rumble as Bowser's entire keep shakes down to its very foundation. We cut to a shot of the castle, and suddenly, a gigantic sword crashes down from the clouds, descending until it impales itself into Bowser's keep. Stars begin to fall from the heavens, 1, 2, 3, until a total of 7 are counted. The title of the game appears, Super Mario RPG, Legend of the 7 Stars. And this image of the sword in the castle was plastered across Super Mario RPG's marketing campaign. After this event, Mario crash lands back at his home, where Toad is awaiting him. From here, Toad instructs us on the rest of the particulars of the game, including Mario RPG's signature timing mechanics, where button inputs on attacks and defense will increase the damage you do to enemies, while decreasing the damage you take from incoming attacks. After learning the rest of the mechanics, Toad instructs Mario to go to the Mushroom Kingdom and sends him off on another incredible adventure to find out what just happened. Alright, Eric, what's the deal? Why have you spent the last 5 minutes describing the start of Mario RPG? Well, I'm glad you asked. I wanted to play the original iteration of the game before the remake releases in November. It's one of my favorite games, and it has been a long time since I did a full playthrough. Upon my completion of the game, I had some thoughts. And when you have thoughts, you make content. That's what podcasters do. Mario RPG's opening moments define what are its greatest strengths. The game is able to simultaneously present itself as a familiar Mario experience while also subverting your standard Mario expectations from the get-go. As mentioned before, upon starting Mario RPG, you're standing at the door of Bowser's Keep within moments, ready to rescue the princess. It would normally take you hours to get to this point in any other Mario game, but here you are at the very start. Despite that, it's still familiar territory for anyone who has played a Mario game before, as you jump around the castle just like you're used to. Until you encounter combat for the first time. Luckily, Mario RPG's combat system is simplistic in its approach, with one of 4 Super Nintendo buttons controlling one of the following actions: attack, special, item, etc., which is defend or run. It is easy to understand, and Bowser's Keep is the perfect space to learn this system, since all the enemies there are pushovers. And once again, within moments, you're facing Bowser, who's normally reserved for the conclusion of Mario games. Again, anyone picking up Mario RPG who isn't familiar with the RPG genre is going to be caught off guard that this particular Mario game is different, which is precisely why this game goes out of its way to establish familiarity right off the bat. The player experiences some comforts of other Mario games while also experiencing a casual introduction to RPGs. Subverting your expectations while being able to retain a feeling of familiarity is a hard line to toe, one that I think Square and Nintendo pulled off exceptionally well. A common criticism I've heard of this game is that it wants to be a platformer and an RPG at the same time, and doesn't do a particularly good job on either front. I would argue that the point wasn't to make a masterpiece of an RPG and a standout platformer, but to take the strengths of both and try to build something that would be successful using Mario as a character. I will admit, the isometric view is an interesting choice for a character known for precision platforming, but I'm personally unbothered by it. Nintendo had Mario down to a science, and Square had popularized and perfected RPGs. The marriage was almost guaranteed to be a success, and the idea to include familiar Mario elements with subversive elements at every turn are what make Mario RPG an incredibly unique adventure. And it tells you all of this at the start of the game. You're playing Mario, and sure, you're at Bowser's castle right away. That is familiar to you, but also a subversion. You can jump around his castle with Mario like you're used to, but when you land on an enemy, the combat system is the subversion. Fighting Bowser to rescue the princess is familiar, but doing it right off the bat is just a bit different than you're used to. And finally, the sword smashing through Star Road and crashing into Bowser's Keep after your victory is perhaps the greatest subversion of all, an interruption of the normal Mario narrative, as if the sword itself is crashing through your expectations of what you thought you knew about Mario. The adventure doesn't stop there, however. Toad tells us that we must travel to the Mushroom Castle, the heart of the Mushroom Kingdom. Now, despite its differing presentation, this is a world that we are comfortable with. I mean, we've saved the Mushroom Kingdom and its princess numerous times before, progressing through linear levels before defeating Bowser. But once again, a subversion hides within familiarity. Mushroom Kingdom was always talked about in abstract as a place that did exist, where Princess Toadstool ruled over the Toads. But upon our arrival to Mushroom Castle, we are pleasantly surprised to find not only the castle where Toadstool resides, but an entire thriving community built around it where Toads live and work. What's more, Mario is actually somewhat famous in this world. But I mean, that makes sense, right? He's only saved the princess from Bowser dozens of times. He would be a celebrity in the Mushroom Kingdom, which just adds to some of the charm and serves to expand the world of this game. Mario isn't just some guy. He's treated with the reverence reserved for not only a heroic character in a game, but as the mascot of Nintendo himself. Upon his arrival, the Chancellor of the Mushroom Kingdom informs Mario that Toadstool hasn't returned, and Mario communicates with him in the manner in which he communicates in this game as a silent protagonist, with a series of hilarious pantomimes that involve him flying around the throne room and even transforming into Bowser. With all that information out of the way, Mario's next move is clear. Despite the unknown threat of the sword, Mario sets off to do what he does best: find and rescue the princess, who could be anywhere in this brand new, yet sort of familiar world. From this point on, the RPG portion of the game begins to assert itself. Just before leaving the Mushroom Kingdom, Mario meets his first new companion, Mallow, a timid Nimbus Cloud who thinks he's a frog. Mallow is a brand new character, and where Mario is pretty much Mario, Mallow is one of the characters in the game that experiences what could be considered a full character arc. He begins as a scared crybaby, but learns to be brave as he accompanies Mario on his quests. The duo soon becomes a trio when they meet Geno, a resident of a place called Star Road, who inhabited a wooden doll to complete his mission. Geno had been sent by a higher authority to fix the damage done to Star Road, and it is here that we get the central plot of the story, making us realize that this adventure would be so much bigger than your average Mario game. Exor, which was the name of the sword that had crashed into Bowser's Keep, had shattered the Star Road when he descended from the sky, causing 7 stars to fall to the land below. Gino had been tasked with recovering the stars in order to repair the Star Road, and until that was done, no one's wishes could be granted or come true. He also explained that Exor is part of the Smithy Gang. Their plan was to use Bowser's Keep as a staging ground to take over the rest of the world, and with the Star Road's ability to grant wishes destroyed, no one would be able to stop them. Seeing that Mario and Mallow have already recovered 2 of the 7 star pieces, Gino decides to join their group. Well, this has certainly put a wrinkle in our usual Mario adventure, hasn't it? While finding and rescuing the princess still remains our primary and most immediate objective, there's a new threat to consider. The Smithy Gang now looms as an ever-approaching threat, just like the silhouette of the sword and castle, which can be seen in the backgrounds of several levels. With Gino joining our group, our heroes continue their adventure to find the star pieces and save the princess. It doesn't take long for our next subverted Mario expectation to present itself, however. The trio happen upon a location called Booster Tower, the home of the childish Booster. Outside of Booster Tower, we once again encounter Bowser, the King Koopa himself. Ever since the sword Exor fell from the sky and collided with Bowser's Keep, we haven't seen or heard much from Mario's #1 nemesis. There have been a few scenes here and there where Bowser has attempted to rally his Koopa troop to retake the castle, but in each of these instances, the number of Bowser's followers decreases dramatically. When we find him at Booster Tower, he is all alone, the once mighty Koopa King brought low. We see Bowser in a different light. He's actually emotionally vulnerable, lamenting the loss of his castle, his troops, and his way of life. Truly and utterly lost without the things that have come to define him. Bowser, noticing Mario, quickly shakes off this appearance and puts on his usual menacing front. Mario and Bowser both discover that Princess Toadstool is being held captive in this Booster Tower and decide to form a tentative alliance to rescue her. And by tentative alliance, I mean Bowser forces us to join his Koopa troop to save the princess and retake his castle. For gamers in the 90s, this was even more shocking than seeing Bowser drive go-karts alongside Mario. These two usual adversaries had so much history, so much bad blood, but here they are, working together. This was unheard of. Bowser's the bad guy, he's always up to no good, always looking to kidnap the princess and exploit weaknesses to get his way. But realizing he's out of his league by himself, Bowser joins the party and becomes a playable party member. The enemy of my enemy is my friend indeed. Mario and Bowser, along with Gino and Mallow, eventually rescue the princess from a sham wedding ceremony where Booster intended to marry her. Maybe this is where Bowser got the idea for his grand scheme in Super Mario Odyssey. The gang promptly returns her to the Mushroom Kingdom, where the Toads are overjoyed at the return of their monarch. After meeting with the Chancellor and deciding what to do next, the 4 heroes, well, 3 heroes and 1 Koopa King, decide to continue their quest to find the star pieces and retake Bowser's Keep. But before the gang can leave, Toadstool, using her trusty parasol, does her best Mary Poppins impression by floating down from the sky. Ever since the origin of Mario, the princess has sat on the sidelines, always playing the role of damsel for Mario to rescue. But no longer. She informs Mario of her intent to go with them, to help save the world from the Smithy Gang, and be an active participant in the adventures, rather than just being the one sitting around waiting to be rescued. Another incredible subversion. Princess Toadstool is a known character and her role has always been consistent, always being the catalyst for Mario's adventures. But here, in one of the first instances I can remember, she decides to take action and be a part of Mario's quest. And Toadstool is an incredibly useful party member. Functioning as the group's white mage, Toadstool's group healing abilities are the key to success in some difficult battles to come. Bowser and Toadstool working alongside Mario are perhaps some of the game's biggest surprises, and at the time, it was incredible to see these 3 characters on screen alongside one another for such an extended period of time. But it works so well. We get so much representation of all these characters' character that we haven't gotten to see before, as they interact with the most fleshed out Mario world we've ever gotten to explore. We learn more about them than in any previous Mario games. One of my favorite scenes is when our heroes visit the hidden Monstro Town. Bowser encounters a few of his old Koopa Troop members who have deserted. They have found their way to Monstro Town and started a better life, with one of the Goombas even having kids. When they see their former boss, they are naturally uneasy, having abandoned Bowser at his lowest point. But Bowser, in a shocking display of compassion and humanity, tells them not to worry, that he and Mario can handle things from here, and actually wishes them the best of luck. He seems genuinely happy that some of his former subordinates have built a better life for themselves. As the game hurtles towards its inevitable conclusion, the Mario and RPG elements start to blend together even more into a cohesive story and game. The gang visits a sunken pirate ship in the middle of the ocean to recover a star piece and have a showdown with one of the game's coolest characters, Captain Jonathan Jones. Milo returns to his home of Nimbusland to discover that he is the long-lost prince, and that his parents, the king and queen, are being held against their will. Milo works with Mario to overcome his fears and frees his homeland, thus completing his character arc. With all 6 star pieces, the heroes finally make their way to Bowser's Keep to help Bowser retake his home and confront the Smithy gang. After a long and fierce battle against many of Smithy's best lieutenants, including the massive sword Exor atop Bowser's Keep, Mario and company enter Smithy's factory where he's mass-producing weapons to take over the world. Once they confront and defeat him, they claim the final star, and Geno is able to return back to Star Road and repair it so that wishes are granted once more. As you can probably guess by what you've heard me say so far, I appreciate Super Mario RPG because it took so many established concepts about Mario and turned them on their head. We faced off with Bowser so early in the game, only to have him become our ally. Our quest to save Toadstool morphed into a world-spanning adventure with the largest stakes in a Mario game to date, and Toadstool herself even participates in the adventure to save her world. We got rich new characters like Geno and Malo that were able to stand beside our usual Mario suspects and feel like they were an organic part of the world. The world was filled with Mario callbacks and familiar settings, but wasn't overwhelmed by them. The game would still remind you from time to time that yes, this was indeed a Mario game that you were playing, but it still allowed the game to tell an incredible story, one that had never been done before. At the time, it was a revelation. Mario was his most expressive ever, and the world he lived in felt bigger than it ever had before. Now these concepts are Mario staples. Mario has more personality with each passing game, and his adventures are always finding ways to one-up themselves, again, pun intended. And while I would be a fool to suggest that Mario RPG was solely responsible for that, I can't help but feel it was an inspiring force for future Mario adventures. And certainly, the legacies of both the Paper Mario series and the Mario & Luigi series can be traced back to Mario RPG. Despite being the most obvious change to the familiar Mario formula, the RPG system in this game is still worth talking about. The way Mario defeats enemies has been pretty consistent since his creation. Mario's iconic jump has normally been enough to defeat most common enemies, and when that wasn't enough, he's been able to rely on a wide array of power-ups such as mushrooms, fire flowers, tanuki suits, super feathers, and so many more. That is not the case here. Sure, on the overworld, Mario can still jump and platform to traverse levels, but trying to jump on an enemy doesn't defeat them, but rather takes you to a secondary screen where a traditional RPG battle takes place. Mario's defining characteristic is that any of his games should be easy to pick up and start playing. Sure, any newcomer is going to face a learning curve, as with any video game, but Mario's design has always been brilliant in the way that it teaches its player as they play the game, making them naturally feel like they are getting better. RPGs, however, have a much more complex system for defeating enemies and have a wide range of complexity and differentiation among them. The RPG system in Mario RPG is pretty bare bones in comparison to some of its contemporaries. In a similar vein to Pokemon, you could even call it an RPG light. But I don't think this is a knock against the game at all if you remember the approachability aspect of Mario. There was a very high chance that people would be picking this game up off the shelf simply because it had Mario on the box, and an even higher chance that this would very well end up being their first RPG, as the genre still wasn't as popular in the West as it is today. So any Mario RPG system had to be easy to approach as well as teach people the basics of the genre. Assigning each button on the SNES controller a category action simplifies the decision-making process on screen and gives players their core options of attack, defend, item, and special. In making menus accessible via their assigned buttons, your options are easy to understand and there is no confusion or getting lost in menus. Speaking of menus, Mario RPG also keeps its equipment inventory simple as well, only assigning a weapon, a piece of armor, and an accessory to each character. Again, RPGs were still growing in popularity, so equipping gear to characters would be a new concept to a lot of players. By keeping the amount of equipment each character could equip limited, they prevented you from being overwhelmed. Sure, this does limit a lot of customization options, limiting player expression in terms of gear to just the different accessories that do different things. But Mario RPG could hardly have a system as complicated as the Junction or Materia systems for first-time players. In a similar way, the composition of your party also teaches you about some of the standard RPG archetypes that you might encounter in more complex games in the genre. Mario is your standard run-of-the-mill RPG protagonist, an all-around good character, and he has to be since he can't be removed from your party, whose special attacks are a mix of his iconic jump and fire abilities. Mallow is a bit squishier as a mage should be, wielding a mix of ice and thunder magic with some healing and identifying utility. Geno is a glass cannon wielding high attack and magic with a wide variety of crowd control specials, but Geno faints in a light wind. Bowser is a classic tank, boasting high HP as well as a variety of special attacks that damage as well as debuff. And Toadstool fills the role of white mage, with weaker HP and attack but vital group healing and restoration spells while having some of her own debuffing abilities. All party members are viable and can be used to beat the game, but there are certain party members that excel in certain battles. Mallow is especially useful in certain fights where ice magic is a weakness, being the only one who has access to any type of ice elemental damage in the game. A mix of new and familiar characters were used to great effect in order to teach you things that may have been common sense to the more experienced RPG players. Nostalgia can be a bit of a double-edged sword. It can serve as a warm blanket, reminding us of a time when things were easier, and this is especially true of video games. Games are able to form more of a connection with the player since they are interactive, creating bonds between the times we played them and the memories of the things that are/were happening. As much as I profess to love Mario RPG, the truth was I hadn't played it in about 15 years. I've had plenty of experiences in my podcasting journey where I've gone back to play games that I love and found them not exactly as I remembered. So I was nervous picking this game up for the first time in a long time. It was one of my formative memories and most likely my introduction to RPGs, far and away my favorite genre of video games. I'd always assumed that everyone loved this game like I did, but as news of a remake came out earlier this year, I did see some rumblings on the fringes of the internet. Mario RPG isn't good. It never was. The marriage of platformer and RPG didn't work. The game was dull, too easy except when it wasn't, and wholly unremarkable as far as RPGs were concerned. I always try to keep an open mind when it comes to games, so this discourse made me anxious. Maybe I had Mario RPG on a pedestal. Maybe it was an average RPG, a relic of the 16-bit era, the last gasp of Mario on the Super Nintendo, put out as one last attempt to wring money out of a console that was about to be left behind. My worries were largely left unfounded. I loved every second of my replay of Mario RPG. 15 years later, it was still as good as I remembered. I didn't struggle with the isometric platforming, and while the combat was simple compared to RPGs I had experienced since the 90s, I still managed to find enough variety in the systems and characters to keep me going strong right up to the very end. Another one of my fears was put to rest, and this was just further confirmation of what I was starting to feel with greater confidence. Unlockables ultimately is my story, and as long as I'm telling it, my opinion is the only one that matters. I'm generally a positive person, and I tend to hold more positive opinions on most games, even on what some would consider bad video game experiences. Mario RPG cemented this feeling in my mind, and cemented itself once again on a list of my personal favorite games of all time. The legacy of Mario RPG is hard to decipher. I mean, it's Mario after all. Even in the 90s, his reputation was legendary. Mario was so important to gaming that it would be difficult for anything to add to his legacy in any significant manner. But in 1996, a year where Mario 64 overshadowed everything, Super Mario RPG stood tall as Mario's swan song and farewell to the Super Nintendo. It expanded what we thought was possible in a Mario adventure and gave us a world to explore that felt familiar, but new. Even though I knew most of the game pretty well, it still managed to surprise me even today, subverting my expectations of what Mario could be. And as I stated above, that is by far the most impressive thing about Mario RPG's existence. It is a Mario adventure unique amongst its peers, with even its spiritual successors Paper Mario and Mario & Luigi failing to fully emulate what makes Mario RPG so special. It gives us a setting and game that feels comfortable and familiar, but still manages to find a multitude of ways to surprise and delight. I, for one, can't wait to play the remake that is coming out later this year to see what tweaks and new surprises are in store. After this experience, I can confidently say that Mario RPG stands out as not just one of the greatest RPGs and games on the Super Nintendo, but one of my favorite RPGs of all time. What's up, guys? Thank you so much for listening to my essay on Mario RPG. I had a great time writing it, I had a great time recording it, and I had an even better time playing the game. If you guys just do me a favor, if you want to catch up with me on any of the social medias or in our Discord server, go to linktr.ee/Unlockables podcast to get all of those incredible links. Everything you need to know is there. I'm not going to list out each one of my social medias, but all those things are also in the description of the episode. So go on over, follow me on Twitter, Instagram, join the Discord server, and just say hi, say what's up, and join the conversation. And as always, remember, it's not just the story of video games, it is the story of you.